Revenge office stories. They really thought they'd broken me. After years of being the architect behind their Edtech empire, the engine that brought their entire vision to life, I was tossed aside with a cold, two-sentence email that felt like a slap in the face after all my sacrifices. They figured I'd just fade away, quietly, another casualty of a toxic startup culture that chews up talent and spits it out without a second thought. But oh, how wrong they were. They underestimated the depth of my knowledge and the fire of my resolve. They forgot who built their house from the ground up and, more importantly, where all the load-bearing walls were hidden. The fragile foundations that only I knew could crumble with the right strategic push, the vulnerabilities I'd patched over time, but now could expose. This isn't just a tale of betrayal. It's a chronicle of calculated resurgence, of turning pain into precision, of transforming victimhood into victory. This is the story of how I took my life back by dismantling everything they built, brick by digital brick, until their so-called empire was nothing but ruins in the rearview mirror of my new beginning, a testament to the power of quiet intelligence over loud arrogance. I remember the exact moment the seed of revenge was planted, etched into my memory like a pivotal scene in a thriller. It was in the dim glow of my laptop screen at 2 a.m., staring at that dismissive email, my hands trembling not from fear, but from a simmering fury that had been building for months, fueled by countless slights and erasures. They had underestimated me, seen me as disposable, a mere employee to be replaced, but I had the blueprints to their success tucked away in my mind and soon in my hands, ready to be weaponized. What followed was a meticulous unraveling, a symphony of subtle strikes that exposed every flaw, every shortcut, every act of hubris that had been glossed over in the pursuit of growth at any cost. And in the end, it wasn't about destruction for destruction's sake. It was about justice, about ensuring that no one else would suffer the same erasure I had endured, about reclaiming the narrative that had been stolen from me and rewriting it on my terms. It started like they always do, with a big promise, the promise of changing the world, of democratizing education through technology. 5 years ago, I was employee number 3 at a tiny startup called Cognify, joining right after the founders had scraped together seed money from friends and family. The CEO, a charismatic salesman named Logan, had this dazzling vision for an adaptive learning platform that would revolutionize K-12 education, tailoring lessons to individual students' needs in ways traditional classrooms never could. He could sell the dream. Sure, pacing back and forth in our cramped co-working space, his eyes lighting up as he described algorithms that would personalize lessons for every child, bridging gaps in underserved schools, making learning accessible and engaging for kids from all backgrounds. But he couldn't actually build it. His skills were in hype, not in the nuts and bolts of development. That's where I came in, fresh from a PhD in educational technology, armed with years of experience in curriculum design, software architecture, and user experience optimization from previous roles in academia and smaller tech firms. As the lead instructional designer and systems architect, I was the backbone of Cognify, the unsung hero holding it all together. I wasn't just writing code. I was breathing life into the pedagogical heart of the platform, infusing it with evidence-based learning theories like Bloom's taxonomy and Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. For the first 2 years, my life was a blur of late nights hunched over my keyboard, cheap coffee from the corner vending machine that always tasted like regret mixed with determination, and a genuine belief that we were making something that mattered, something that could level the playing field for students in underfunded districts. I designed the core curriculum from scratch, meticulously mapping out learning pathways that adapted in real time based on student performance, incorporating gamification elements like badges and leaderboards to keep kids engaged without feeling like they were in a rigid classroom environment. The interactive modules I created wowed our first angel investors. I remember the demo day vividly, where I showcased a simulation of a history lesson that morphed based on a child's interests, turning a dry timeline into an immersive adventure complete with virtual artifacts and quizzes that adjusted difficulty on the fly. Those early days were exhilarating, a whirlwind of creativity and camaraderie. We'd huddle in our makeshift office, a converted garage with flickering fluorescent lights, exposed wiring, and mismatched chairs scavenged from thrift stores, brainstorming until dawn, fueled by pizza deliveries and shared dreams. Logan would handle the pitches, charming potential backers with a silver tongue. But it was my prototypes that sealed the deals, the tangible proof that turned skepticism into investment checks. When we landed our first $10 million funding round, a milestone that felt like validation for all the sleepless nights, Logan popped champagne and gave a big speech about his vision, strutting around like a peacock in our upgraded space. Toasting to the future he claimed to have engineered single-handedly. He completely forgot to mention the woman who had single-handedly built the prototype that got them the check. The late-night coding sessions where I debugged endless loops until my eyes blurred. The user testing I conducted with volunteer teachers from local schools. The intuitive interface that made complex data feel accessible and user-friendly. Drawing rave reviews in early feedback sessions. I brushed it off at the time, telling myself it was par for the course in startups. It's a team sport, right? The work was its own reward, the satisfaction of seeing teachers' eyes light up during pilots, student scores improve in beta tests. And for a while, it truly was rewarding. We grew rapidly, signing on school districts across the Midwest and East Coast, winning awards at Edtech conferences where I'd present our platform to packed rooms of educators and investors, only to have Logan swoop in for the Q&A and take the credit with his polished anecdotes. I was proud nonetheless, a quiet pride in knowing I was the architect behind the success. I felt like a founder, even if my name wasn't on the door, the cap table, or in the press releases that lauded Logan's innovative leadership. I poured everything into that company. Weekends spent refining algorithms instead of hiking with friends or pursuing hobbies. Holidays coding through family dinners via remote access on my phone. Relationships that fizzled because I was always just one more feature away from balance, always prioritizing the company's needs over my own well-being. I was loyal to a fault, believing that my dedication would be reciprocated with recognition and equity. And that was my first mistake, a naive trust in a system that rewarded charisma over competence, flash over substance. But the shift happened slowly, insidiously, like a frog in warming water that doesn't notice until it's too late. Once the company was stable, after the really heavy lifting was done, and we had a sleek downtown office with ping-pong tables, free snacks, and beanbag chairs to mask the underlying burnout culture, the atmosphere started to curdle. Logan's charisma soured into pure arrogance, his once inspiring pep talks turning into monologues where he'd belittle anyone who questioned his genius, often with a smirk that made my blood boil. My role as a builder was done. Now I was just a cog in the machine, and one he seemed intent on grinding down to nothing, perhaps to assert dominance or eliminate any perceived threat to his ego. My input in meetings, once vital and eagerly sought after for its depth, was now openly dismissed with eye rolls, interruptions, or condescending remarks that chipped away at my confidence. In front of new, younger male hires, fresh-faced coders straight from Ivy League boot camps, eager but inexperienced, Logan would cut me off mid-sentence, saying things like, "Leila, let's stick to the big picture," when my mastery of the details was the only reason we were successful in the first place, the granular insights that prevented costly mistakes. I'd spend hours preparing data-driven presentations on user engagement metrics, complete with charts and projections, only to have them waved away as overly technical or not visionary enough. The condescension soon morphed into harassment, subtle at first, but escalating into a pattern that left me dreading work. Snide comments about my work-life balance when I left at 6 p.m. to avoid total exhaustion. Implications that my assertiveness was aggressive while the men's was decisive, or worse, whispers about my moodiness during high-stress periods. They were systematically erasing me, diminishing my contributions until I felt like a shadow of the innovator I'd been, my ideas repackaged and credited to others. Then they tried to replace me outright, a move that reeked of calculated obsolescence. They hired a junior developer, Iris, a bright kid fresh out of college with a sparkle in her eye, a resume full of hackathon wins, and an enthusiasm that reminded me of my younger self. Logan pulled me aside one afternoon in the break room, his voice dripping with false enthusiasm and a patronizing pat on the shoulder, and told me to get her up to speed on everything. It was obvious what they were doing. I was being asked to train my own replacement, to hand over the keys to the kingdom I'd built, the proprietary knowledge that was the company's secret sauce. But they miscalculated badly, assuming Iris would be complicit in their games. She was smart and observant, not the naive pawn they presumed. She quickly picked up on the dynamics, the undercurrents of bias. Iris saw how Logan would cut me off in meetings, his interruptions laced with patronizing smiles that barely hid his disdain. She noticed how a male colleague, let's call him Mark, would propose my exact same idea 2 days later, often verbatim from notes I'd shared, to thunderous applause and backslaps from the leadership team, while mine had been met with silence or nitpicking. Iris and I bonded over coffee breaks in the kitchenette, away from prying eyes, where she'd whisper, "That was bullshit. Your approach to the adaptive algorithm is way more efficient and scalable." She'd quietly message me after those humiliating sessions via Slack. "Your idea was the right one. Don't let them gaslight you into thinking otherwise." A silent alliance was forming, born from shared frustration at the boys' club atmosphere, the invisible barriers that favored bravado over brilliance. When I pushed back on impossible deadlines, demands for features that would require rewriting core code in weeks, risking stability, Logan labeled me too emotional, his tone laced with mockery during one-on-one check-ins, implying my concerns were hormonal rather than logical. During one particularly grueling performance review in his glass-walled office, he physically blocked the doorway while he berated me for a minor bug that wasn't even my team's fault, his face inches from mine, voice rising in a pure power play designed to intimidate and diminish. Iris, working late in the adjacent cubicle, overheard it all, the raised voice, the veiled threats about my attitude affecting my future at the company. She peeked over later, her eyes wide with concern and solidarity, offering a quiet, "Are you okay?" that meant the world. That moment solidified our bond, turning quiet observations into a shared resolve. Little did they know, they had sown the seeds of their own undoing by bringing her in, creating an insider who saw through the facade. The final straw wasn't some dramatic blow-up, no shouting match, or slammed doors that would make for a cinematic exit. It was quiet, almost anticlimactic, but profoundly devastating, a culmination of erosion that left me hollow. It was watching my own erasure in real time, like being edited out of my own life story, pixel by pixel. We were about to launch Cognify 2.0, a massive overhaul that I had personally managed for over a year, coordinating cross-functional teams of developers, designers, and educators, iterating on feedback from beta testers in real classrooms, ensuring the new AI-driven personalization didn't compromise data privacy or introduce biases that could harm vulnerable students. I'd poured my soul into it, sacrificing sleep, sanity, and social life to make it flawless, troubleshooting issues at all hours to meet aggressive timelines. At the all-hands meeting to announce the launch, held in our glossy conference room with catered sushi, branded swag bags, and a live stream for remote employees, Logan stood on stage under the spotlight, his PowerPoint slides flashing my designs as if they were his own brainchildren. He presented the whole thing with theatrical flair, gesturing dramatically at the demo videos I'd edited myself late into the night, hyping features I'd conceptualized and refined. He thanked the new head of product, a guy named Ethan who'd been there for a mere 6 months, brought in for his connections from a previous unicorn startup, for his visionary leadership that supposedly steered the ship. Ethan's contributions amounted to vague emails full of buzzwords, golf outings with investors, and little else. Yet there he was, beaming as the crowd applauded, accepting high fives from the execs. My name was never mentioned. Not once, not even in passing. I just sat there in the audience, in the back row among the interns and junior staff, invisible, a ghost in the machine I had built from the ground up, my fingerprints on every line of code, every user flow. That night, I went home to my small apartment, the one cluttered with takeout containers, half-read books on leadership and burnout recovery that I'd hoped would help me navigate the toxicity, and stacks of notebooks filled with ideas I'd never gotten credit for. I felt this profound, terrifying emptiness wash over me, a void where my passion used to burn brightly, now replaced by a gnawing anxiety that kept me up at night, replaying every slight, every dismissal in an endless loop. I realized my loyalty wasn't to a noble cause anymore. It was to my own abuse, a cycle of diminishing returns that was eroding my self-worth, my health, and my joy. Staying wasn't strength. It was self-harm, a slow poison I was administering to myself daily, allowing them to chip away at my spirit. With tears streaming down my face, illuminated by the blue light of my screen in the otherwise dark room, I typed my resignation letter. It was concise, professional, thanking them for the opportunity, while stating my immediate departure without any hint of the storm raging inside. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it, my heart pounding as the email whooshed away into the ether. The response came swiftly, almost automated, Logan's 2-sentence email. "We accept your resignation. Effective immediately. We'll have your personal items couriered to you. No thank you for the years of innovation that propelled them forward. No good luck in future endeavors. No acknowledgement of the blood, sweat, and tears. 5 years of my life. Countless breakthroughs, salvaged crises, built empires, deleted in an instant as if I were a faulty line of code to be excised without remorse." The first few weeks post-resignation were a haze of disorientation and decompression. I wandered my apartment like a lost soul, binge-watching shows I barely registered, applying half-heartedly to jobs while grappling with the betrayal, and even seeking therapy to unpack the emotional toll. Friends checked in, offering platitudes about better opportunities ahead, and their loss, but inside the fog was thick, a mix of relief and regret. As it began to clear, though, something else started to bubble up. Anger. Not the hot, impulsive kind that leads to rash decisions, but a cold, clear, calculating anger that sharpened my focus like a blade honed for precision. They thought I'd just go lick my wounds, perhaps spiral into obscurity or settle for a lesser role elsewhere. They forgot what my real job was, the one who knew every vulnerability in the system, every corner cut in the rush to scale, every ethical lapse brushed under the rug. And they forgot I had an ally on the inside, someone who had witnessed the rot firsthand and shared my outrage. My revenge wasn't going to be a messy lawsuit with its drawn-out depositions, legal fees, and uncertain outcomes that could drag on for years, or a viral Twitter rant that could backfire and paint me as bitter or unprofessional in industry circles. It would be quiet, anonymous, and total a surgical strike using facts as my scalpel, evidence as my ammunition. I called Iris from a burner phone I'd bought at a corner store for cash, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. I was taking a risk, exposing my intentions to potential backlash, but my gut told me I could trust her implicitly. She was disgusted by the culture, the casual sexism that permeated decisions, the credit stealing that demotivated talent, the burnout glorified as dedication, and had seen firsthand how they treated me, the quiet dignity I'd maintained amid the barbs, which inspired her own sense of justice. When I laid out the plan over encrypted messages on Signal, detailing the weak points I'd identified during my tenure, she didn't hesitate for a moment. "I'm in," she replied almost immediately, her words a lifeline in the digital void. "They don't deserve to succeed. Let's make sure they can't hurt anyone else." My revenge now had an inside woman, a partner in this covert operation, amplifying its effectiveness. Our plan was simple, yet elegant. Use their own negligence against them, turning their shortcuts into sinkholes that would swallow their ambitions. I knew where the skeletons were buried, the overlooked compliances, the fudged metrics, the promises unkept. Iris had the keys to the closets, access to internal drives, logs, and confidential files that I no longer could reach. First, their student data privacy certifications had lapsed in 3 states, California, New York, and Illinois, a task Logan had dismissed as annoying paperwork in emails I'd archived before leaving, complete with timestamps and CC lists. I had those old threads saved on a secure drive with his flippant responses like, "We'll deal with it later. Focus on growth metrics for the next round." Iris confirmed they'd never been renewed, pulling reports from the compliance dashboard that showed glaring red flags. Overdue alerts ignored for months. Second, I knew they were in breach of contract with their biggest client, a huge school district in Texas that accounted for a quarter of revenue, because the platform's downtime was double what the SLA, service level agreement, allowed. Outages I'd warned about in multiple memos but were ignored in favor of rapid feature rolls to impress investors. Iris pulled the latest server logs, time-stamped evidence of failures during peak school hours, complete with error codes and user impact reports, the smoking gun that could trigger hefty penalties, terminations, and even lawsuits. Third, there was the new AI feature Logan had promised investors in glowing pitch decks, a revolutionary tool for predictive learning analytics that would forecast student outcomes with uncanny accuracy. I knew it was smoke and mirrors, a hastily cobbled prototype riddled with biases, inaccuracies, and ethical issues like data overreach. I'd raised concerns in detailed memos that were buried in shared drives. Iris got me a copy of the internal project file, including code reviews, test results, and internal chats proving it was a barely functional demo, far from the game changer hyped to funders, with placeholders where real ML models should have been. We compiled these into 3 anonymous packages, meticulously organized with tabs, highlights, and indexes, no embellishments, just the raw truth laid bare. One for the Department of Education in each of the 3 states, complete with contact info for whistleblower lines and guidelines for anonymous submissions. One for the superintendent of the Texas school district, addressed to her office with proof of breaches and suggestions for audits. And the last one, the kill shot for the lead partner at their primary venture capital firm, the one who'd bankrolled their Series B with millions based on Logan's exaggerated promises, including financial projections tied to the fictitious AI capabilities. Iris couriered the documents to a neutral Dropbox at a public library 2 towns over, and I mailed them from a city 2 states away, using gloves, paying in cash, and even varying my handwriting to avoid any trace or pattern. We didn't add a single word of our own interpretation or accusation. We just let the company's own documents tell the story. The emails, logs, reports, and memos speaking volumes about negligence, deceit, hubris, and a culture that prioritized appearances over integrity. It was poetry in paperwork, a revenge scripted in their own handwriting, impossible to deny or spin. I mailed the packages on a Monday, my hand steady as I dropped them into the blue mailbox on a quiet street corner, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot as I walked away with a sense of finality. For 5 weeks, nothing happened, or at least nothing visible on the surface. I monitored from afar, refreshing news alerts, LinkedIn updates, and industry forums obsessively, second-guessing if I'd overestimated the impact or if bureaucracy would swallow the tips whole. Maybe the packages were lost in the mail, dismissed as spam, or buried under paperwork piles. Doubt crept in during quiet moments, but I held firm, reminding myself that real change often simmers before it boils, that seeds take time to sprout. Then, the first domino fell with a subtle thud that echoed through the Edtech world. A niche Edtech trade publication, one I'd subscribed to anonymously via a throwaway email, ran a story. Cognify under investigation in California for significant lapses in student data protection. It cited anonymous tips leading to a state audit, detailing potential violations of COPPA and FERPA regulations that could result in fines and mandated overhauls. That was the first crack in their facade, a hairline fracture that spread quickly across social media and professional networks. Educators tweeting concerns about student privacy, competitors subtly amplifying the noise through retweets and blog posts, parents groups starting petitions. Logan issued a bland press release denying issues and promising full cooperation, but the damage was done. Investor calls grew tense, with whispers of due diligence failures. 2 weeks later, the floodgates opened wide. unleashing a torrent of consequences. The Texas school district, our whale client worth 7 figures annually and a flagship partnership, announced it was terminating its contract with Cognify, citing a material breach of contract in a public statement that referenced unacceptable downtime and reliability failures, backed by their own logs. The news went national, picked up by education sections in major outlets like the New York Times, EdSurge, and even CNN's education segment, framing it as a cautionary tale of tech overpromising in schools. Parents' groups mobilized further, demanding transparency and alternatives, while school boards in other states paused renewals, citing the controversy as a red flag. The stock, well, as a private company, there was no public stock, but whispers of valuation plummets circulated in VC circles, with cap tables being frantically revised. The real earthquake, though, happened behind closed doors, away from the headlines and public scrutiny. The VC firm, staring at the evidence of fraud I'd sent, the inflated AI claims, the compliance lapses, the contract breaches, acted swiftly and mercilessly, their reputation on the line. I watched it all unfold from my apartment, now transformed into a command center with multiple screens tracking developments, anonymous alerts pinging my phone. Iris would send me links to the news articles with a single popcorn emoji, our code for "it's happening. Grab the snacks." The VCs didn't just pull funding. They launched a full-scale forensic audit, bringing in external consultants from top firms to comb through books, code repositories, and communication logs, interviewing employees under strict NDAs to uncover the extent of the mismanagement. She described the scene in coded texts, auditors in sharp suits marching in like an invasion force, seizing laptops and servers, setting up war rooms in conference areas, their questions probing deep into decisions I'd long criticized. Iris gave her 2 weeks, noticed the day the auditors walked in, slipping out gracefully with a fabricated story about pursuing grad school abroad, her exit time to avoid suspicion. Logan was immediately placed on indefinite administrative leave, a corporate euphemism for "you're done, pack your things," amid rumors of boardroom shouting matches where partners accused him of misleading them, jeopardizing their portfolio. The company that was once the darling of Edtech, featured in Forbes 30 Under 30 lists, Logan's face front and center, of course, celebrated at TechCrunch Disrupt, and hailed as a disruptor, was now a pariah, toxic to partners, talent, and potential acquirers alike. They announced massive layoffs via an impersonal email blast to the remaining staff, cutting 60% of the workforce in a desperate bid to stem the financial bleeding, with severance packages that were insultingly minimal. Their flashy office, with its open-plan desks, motivational murals quoting Silicon Valley icons, and fully stocked kitchen, went up for lease, the Cognify sign peeled off like shedding skin, leaving ghost marks on the glass doors. Within 6 months, Cognify was insolvent, filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in a last-ditch effort that failed spectacularly. Its assets, the very platform I'd architected, the code I'd written, the modules I'd designed, were sold for pennies on the dollar to a competitor who gutted it for parts, integrating the useful bits while discarding the tainted brand, erasing the last traces of Logan's vision from the industry landscape. There was no dramatic confrontation, no gotcha moment where I revealed myself triumphantly, no need for theatrics. Logan never called, never suspected. He was too arrogant, too self-absorbed to ever imagine that the emotional woman he cast aside had allied with the very person he hired to replace her, turning his hubris into his downfall through irrefutable evidence. Our revenge wasn't loud or flashy. It was silent, precise, and total, a masterclass in leverage and patience. This wasn't just about getting even. It was about forcing them to confront the rot they'd created, the toxic culture of erasure, exploitation, and shortcuts that prioritized short-term gains over long-term sustainability. The company didn't implode because of me. It imploded because of what it was, a house of cards built on lies, mistreatment, and unchecked ego. We just held up the receipts, shining a light on the shadows they'd hoped would stay hidden forever, accelerating the inevitable. In the aftermath, Iris and I stayed in touch through secure channels, our bond forged in fire and unbreakable. She landed a role at a women-led startup focused on ethical AI in education. Thriving away from the toxicity, her career trajectory boosted by the experience. As for me, I channeled the ordeal into consulting, helping other edtech firms build ethical platforms from the ground up, ensuring credit goes where it's due, fostering inclusive cultures, and even speaking anonymously at conferences about whistleblowing in tech. In the end, they didn't just fire me. They set me free from the chains of their dysfunction. Taking them down wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my work, my dignity, and the years they stole from me. Transforming betrayal into empowerment, turning a painful chapter into a launchpad for something better. It was about making sure that the toxic culture they built couldn't hurt anyone else, especially young women like Iris just starting their careers, who deserve environments where their voices are amplified, not silenced, where innovation is collaborative, not competitive in the worst ways. They tried to bury me, but they forgot I was a seed, ready to grow stronger from the dirt they heaped upon me, sprouting into a force they could never contain. That's my story, a long and difficult road marked by late nights of doubt, moments of moral reckoning, ethical deliberations about the right path, and ultimately, a triumphant reclamation that restored my sense of agency. It taught me that true power isn't in building empires for others. It's in knowing when to walk away, how to protect yourself, and how to ensure justice follows, even if from the shadows. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have walked away quietly to preserve your peace, pursued legal action through HR or courts for harassment claims, or crafted your own quiet revolution using inside knowledge? Share your thoughts, experiences, or hypothetical strategies. Your stories might inspire someone else to reclaim their power, to recognize the signs early, or to build better workplaces from the start.